You're talking about selling a product that's saving the world, yet you're putting it on oil-driven container ships across the oceans. I thought it could have been handled a lot better. Green manufacturing is something we've talked about in a lot of videos, but it's also something that people ask us a ton of questions about. So I thought I'd dedicate an entire video today about the ins and outs of green manufacturing, give you the pros and the cons, and also discuss two case studies with you. One that went extremely well and one that, in my mind, failed completely. So let's start with the stories. The first one is a company, I'm not going to name their name. I found their professional demeanor to be quite embarrassing. I didn't think that this went down very well. I thought it could have been handled a lot better. But to start it off, two words, virtue signaling, right? There's green manufacturing for the sake of making the earth a better place, which I'm 100% supportive of. In fact, as a partner of Kickstarter, we're one of only a couple partners who offer green manufacturing services. Having said that, green manufacturing for the sake of green manufacturing or for the sake of marketing is not solving problems. And in this specific instance, I think it was actually hurting it. So this customer had a recycled material in the US that they wanted to ship by boat to China for us to use and then ship back to America for them to sell. I won't go into too many more details, but even just that, right? What's the point? You're talking about selling a product that's saving the world, yet you're putting it on oil-driven container ships across the oceans. It just doesn't really make sense. I'm not a big fan of it. And the reality of green manufacturing, right? There are the pros and the cons, right? So I'll segue with the pros and the cons, and then I'll go back into the good example. So the common misconceptions, the problems, the cons, right? What could be affected going the sustainable route, right? Prices, timelines, quality are probably the three biggest things that everybody talks about when it comes to manufacturing products. So how does going the green route affect price? Well, it makes it more expensive, right? For obvious reasons. The materials aren't as easy to find. The supply of those materials isn't as common. The demand is getting higher and higher. And frankly, the technology isn't quite developed enough to make it accessible to every brand, right? The big brands are still making mistakes. People are making mistakes and it's expensive. And so small companies, while they do want to go the sustainable route, often what they find is that the price gets so high that the company no longer is sustainable to run. We quote it out for people and they end up not choosing the sustainable route just because it's not possible to run a business like that. Timelines, for the same reasons as price, tend to be a little bit longer, depending on what the material is and the availability of said material. Quality is an interesting one because in a lot of ways, quality is the same, if not better, right? Depending on what you're using. But sometimes, because for the same reasons, it's not as mature of a technology to manufacture those types of materials. The workers aren't as familiar with those types of materials. Sometimes you can have some shortcomings there when it comes to the final quality of the product. So overall, to sum it up, right, I would say green manufacturing is great if you're doing it for the right reasons and if you design a product that won't be too affected by price, time, and quality. Something that makes sense to do sustainable. Right? Unless you're $1 billion, with a government contract type of a deal, the development of those products takes a long time. The way to figure everything out right. It often means retooling factories' machinery or, sourcing material from different places than you're used to. Having said that, to give you a good example, because it's not all bad, there are some companies that are doing this perfectly. One of our customers, a company called Last Object out of Denmark, has run several very successful Kickstarter campaigns. And what they did, their first product was Last Swab, which was basically a reusable Q-tip. They designed it. They thought about the materials. They thought about the way the product was going to be produced. They made sure that not only was the product itself sustainable by getting rid of people using, millions and millions of Q-tips around the world every day and just throwing them out, reusing them. It makes sense. Well, maybe not to some people, but to me it does. Easy wash, easy clean, and reuse. And they just thought about all of these different potential negatives of what could happen. And they've built a business that not only has a sustainable concept behind the products they make, but it's also sustainable when it comes to growing their business and making sure that they have profit while not gouging their end customer either. So there are two sides to every story. I just want to make sure that you're aware that green manufacturing is still tough. It takes a lot of time and it costs more. There will be problems, but if you're dedicated to it, you have a good idea that makes sense, and you really take the time to figure it all out, the ins and the outs, it's absolutely doable, and I recommend it 100%. Hope that helps. Have a good day. Peace.